So Steam's yes and no review system is kind of statistically rigged to make mediocre and like kind of okay games look way more positively rated than they actually are. And in turn, that makes you more willing to buy more games because you think games are better than they actually are. So Steam's review system is it's kind of unique. Most storefronts, most marketplaces are going to use like a 1 through 5 star rating. A lot of other entertainment and media, like movies, for example, use in most scenarios, it's going to be like a 0 to 100 percentage rating. And the yes no system has been very misunderstood in how it works. So I'm going to tell you a story about when I was working on Choo-Choo Charles. So when I was getting towards the end of development on Choo-Choo Charles, I started running a bunch of play tests with hundreds of people. And I would have them play the game, they'd go in blind, and they'd fill out a survey with, they'd report bugs and other issues, things that they did and didn't like, and they would also give the game a score. And naturally, I was just like, okay, I'll just have people rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And I was hoping that I would get like an average of around an 8. That was my goal because I wanted to get on Steam, I wanted to have like an 80% positive review score because I was like, that's a point that I would be happy with. If it was falling below that, I'd be kind of unhappy. I'd feel kind of like I failed the player base and people just weren't really happy with it or as happy as I would have wanted them to be. And so when people started giving in these surveys and I started getting the numbers back, the average rating out of 10 was coming back around like a mid 6 to 7. And I ran multiple tests, as I was kind of testing the game and making additional adjustments and changes and fixing more bugs. And so, the rating kind of crept up a little bit over time, but it kind of settled in at about a 7. And I wasn't super happy about that. I was really disappointed. I was thinking, man, when I release this game, I'm not going to get as good of reviews as I was hoping. But then I realized, wait a minute. So I was looking through my surveys, and it's such an obvious thing, but I've never heard anybody bring this up. So I got to talk about it because I think it's really, really fascinating. So I'm looking through my surveys, and I'm looking at, the graphs with like how people are rating it. And I realized, wait a minute. Almost all of these reviews are above a 5. They're 6s, 7s, 8s, with a handful of 9s and 10s, and like a couple of reviews, like 2 or 3 reviews that are coming back under a 5. And I was like, reasonably, if somebody was on Steam and they were writing a review and they were like, this game was okay, it's like a 6 out of 10, I guess I'll give it a thumbs up. Then they're going to rate it as a yes. Even if it's just a 6, even if the game is like just crossing that line, they're going to give it a thumbs up. And that thumbs up is just as valuable as a 10 out of a 10. Okay, so your 10 out of 10 player that absolutely loves it is just as valuable to your review score as a 6 out of 10. And so obviously I just ran a couple quick numbers and I saw like, okay, if every single review that's above a 6 was a yes, and every single review that's below a 5 was a no, and I just discounted the 5s because that's kind of a perfect like right in the middle, like I'll just take that out. It came back as an overwhelming like positive, not overwhelmingly positive by the Steam standard, but it came back as like I think it was like a 85 or like 90% review score that it would get on Steam. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. Statistics, right? Okay, math, cool. So as I was doing future tests, in addition to having people rate the game on a score on a scale of 1 to 10, I also had them rate the game as if they were rating a Steam product. And so I said, give it a either a yes or a no, and write a brief review. And I found that, surprise, surprise, the numbers that you get off of that yes no come back way more positive, right? And it makes it look like your game is, 90% positive. And technically, it is. It's not a lie. It's not a lie. It's math. So what's so interesting about it is that people perceive the Steam review score as a 1 through 10 score, or they perceive it as a 0 through 100 score. And they'll quote that in various different contexts. One example is the massive divide that we have, the massive kind of out of touch nature of like the journalist to or critic to player ratings. And obviously there is a little bit of out of touchedness with how critics review games. They do generally rate them lower, and it's just they're more difficult to please. They're critics, right? That's their job. But it's also aided by review systems like this. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've seen people in relation to for Choo-Choo Charles, where people will be like, wow, I can't believe that somebody would give this a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. Because look, it's got 92%. It's 92%. It's a 9 out of 10 on Steam. People think it's it's not a 9 out of 10. It's not. Okay, if you were to take 1,000 people blind, which is basically what I did. I didn't play with 1,000 people, but the ratings that I got before launch, they didn't come back as an average 9 out of 10. Okay, they came back as like a 7. But the way that the statistics work, it naturally drives it higher. And that also plays into kind of this additional sort of, phenomenon where, and I couldn't quote specific studies because, again, this was like a couple of years ago when I was learning about some of this stuff. They've done tests where they'll like show a movie to two groups of people. And before watching the movie, they tell group A that this movie was rated 9 out of 10 by critics. And group B is told this movie was rated a 6 out of 10 by critics. Exact same movie. The people who are told that the movie was rated lower rated it significantly lower than the people who were told that it was rated higher. So when you have a review system like this, which naturally kind of upticks the perceived value and quality of a product, naturally more people are going to rate it even more positively. So what you have, or more negatively, right? It goes both ways. So ultimately what this review system does is it creates sort of a curve. I don't know if bell curve is the right term, but basically decent games that are just crossing the line, just crossing the threshold, get rated way higher than they should, and games that are just on the bottom end of the line get rated way worse than they should. And this is good for Steam and good for game developers, obviously. The better that you think a product is, the more likely you are to buy it. Wow. Crazy, I know, insane. Who would have guessed? Now, the one interesting thing about it, though, that I'm still a little bit confused by, is that, like, for, using Choo-Choo Charles as an example, because that's the one that obviously I've got the most data on, since it's my game. If you were to go to, like, PlayStation and check the PlayStation rating, because PlayStation uses a 1 through 5 star rating. On PlayStation, the game has a 4.53 stars out of 5. If I was to show you here, 4.5. On a 10 scale, that would be a 9 out of 10, which is consistent with Steam. Similar thing, I think if you were to go to Xbox, let me check. Yeah, same thing on Xbox. It's got a 4.5 out of 5. So I don't know exactly why that is, that the 5 scale still lines up with the Steam rating, despite the statistical advantage of the yes-no rating system. I think it could be, it's probably a variety of factors. I think one, the console version of the game released a year after the PC version. So I would assume that there were a lot more people, like when it first came out on PC, and there was a lot of hype around it, and everybody was buying it. There were probably a lot more people that were kind of on the fence. They were kind of unsure. They're like, everybody's playing it, so I'll try it. But it wasn't really their kind of thing. There were maybe, more on the fence people. And now that, it's come out on consoles, since it's a year after the fact, maybe the only people that are buying it are people that, like, they've been a fan of the game for the past year, and they're just like, they've been dying to get their hands on it, and it's like they've watched videos of it on YouTube, and they know that this is their kind of game. So maybe there's naturally a more potent user base, and it's not as watered down by the hype and the fear of missing out and stuff like that. It also might just be a console thing. Maybe console games just tend to get higher ratings. I'm not exactly sure because this is the only time that I've released a game on consoles. There are some odd things, and again, also with the console side of things, it could be that people are rating it higher because again, they've seen it come out on PC. They've seen the PC reviews. They know that people generally like. They're like, oh yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. It's not a 9 out of 10, but they perceive it as that, so then they write a higher review in return. So, yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it, but it is very interesting to see. I'm not blaming Steam of doing this intentionally or anything. I mean, heck, I benefit from it a lot. It benefits me. It benefits every other game developer ever, except for the people that make crappy games that their ratings get tanked a little bit. But anybody that's making even decent games is going to get way higher ratings. Okay, everything is in your favor. If you're a game developer and you're getting mixed or bad reviews, you're like, oh no, I've only got a 70%. Bro, stop crying. It's all rigged in your favor. It really couldn't be any easier. So I'm not necessarily blaming Steam saying that they do this intentionally, but it does indirectly, very directly, benefit Steam, whether no matter what the intention is. And it's the system has been very, very, very heavily misinterpreted by players because they see a 92 or a 95 or a 98% on Steam and they think that the game is a 9 out of 10. But again, naturally, when they play the game, they also enjoy it more. It's a weird thing, man. It's a weird thing. But I think it's a really interesting example of just how statistics can be used to honestly lie and manipulate stuff. There's lots of interesting examples of stuff like that. So, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. Again, it's one of these things where it's once you look at it, it's pretty stupidly obvious. So I might not be explaining anything of particular interest, but I've never heard anybody else talk about it, so I just wanted to make a video about it. That's it.